Hello folks, it's Isabel here. I hope everyone's doing alright. I've come on today as I want to give the tag 7 decks for Deadly Sins a go. So this is my VR response to Sylvain's Deadly Sins. I've been watching a few of these with interest and really wanted to give this a go. I actually found some of it quite hard, and because of that challenge I wanted to do it. So I'm going to give it a go and we'll see how it goes. I have to admit that in a couple of categories there's a couple of decks coming through, and that's because, well, you'll see why. Some of them pair up and some of them it's anyway, right, so this is the 7 decks for Deadly Sins. So the first category is Pride, a deck you purchased or used for flexing. Now, I have to admit that first of all, I didn't have a clue what flexing meant. When I then looked it up, I realised that I don't really do flexing. So, you know, I think some people have taken it as kind of being someone, a very precious one, or one you use for showing off or that sort of thing. I have therefore kind of re-evaluated, and for me I've chosen a deck that I have an element of pride in, and the deck I've chosen is the Druid Craft Tarot. And this might seem strange, but the reason I've put it in the pride category is because this is the deck that a couple of months ago I modded, and it was my first deck mod, and I'm very proud of the results, and I'm happy to show them off. So I know lots of people have this deck, and so they know it very well, and I know lots of people have modded it. This is the small box version. I may well get the bigger version at some point that comes with a bigger book, but for now this was a reason why I felt like I could mod it, because it wasn't expensive. So like many people, I decided to trim this. It's quite a large deck, so I wanted it in a more manageable size because I couldn't cope with the borders. So it has white borders and it has another border, so I've trimmed it down, I've corner rounded, and I've also edged it, and I was really pleased with the results. It's much easier to handle. It's not totally even, but it's absolutely fine. It's given it a real rustic feel, which is good for this deck. I have got a little bit of bleeding, but for my first deck mod I was really pleased with that. So that's why I've put it into my pride category, because I'm proud of the result of my first deck mod. Okay, so the second category is Greed, a deck you don't share with anyone or you only use for yourself. Now, this was a challenge because I am a very young tarot reader, so to speak, and I don't read for anybody other than myself. I don't use my cards with anyone, so therefore I don't currently have one that's in that category. However, what I did was I thought, if I was going to read for people, which deck or decks would I not pick up to use? And one of them is my Healing Waves Tarot. Now, this featured in my top 10 video, not top 10, sorry, only 10 decks video I did recently. And I said then that I haven't actually read with this myself very much, but it has such a personal feel to it for me. The reason I was drawn to backing it on Indiegogo was because a lot of the cards had real meanings of things in my life, and really connected very emotionally to me. So I feel like this deck is a very personal deck to me. I wouldn't get it out to read for somebody else, and you know, I want to keep it fairly safe, so that I can use it for myself. And then I also I have to admit that another deck that came in recently that I have been using that would probably also fit in this category is my Tarot of the Magical Forest, because I got this having seen it a few times, particularly on Kelly Bear's channel, and since getting it, every time I've read with it, I've really been impressed at how well it's spoken to me. So I think that currently this would be quite a personal deck to me. I wouldn't necessarily want to share it at the moment. So currently I would say that the two main ones that fall under that category of of not sharing, of greed, are probably those. Okay, so the Wrath category, the deck I'm angry at, and I have to admit that this was the easiest one for me. It took very little time to choose a deck. And the deck that I am angry at is my Forest of Enchantment Tarot. And the reason I'm angry at this deck is, well, there's a couple of reasons. This is a deck that I had seen from an early stage on TarotTube probably last year, and I was drawn to it. And when I then eventually decided I was going to get it, when it first arrived, the book was misprinted, so I had to get another copy, and that sort of spoilt it for me already. I then felt like the card stock was pretty poor compared to some of my other decks. It is really quite flimsy, this card stock. And then the final straw that has made me angry at it, by the way, apologies for this little light trail, and we put our Christmas decks up at the weekend and the Christmas tree is to my right, so I hadn't really thought through the fact that the Christmas lights were going to reflect. Anyway, you can get pretty lights on the book. Where was I? Yeah, so the third reason why I have wrath for this deck is that I adore the art in this deck. I love the pictures. I love that Hermit card. It's so beautiful. It is so cool. But when I tried to use the deck to read earlier in the year, it didn't speak with me. I didn't bond with it very well. I absolutely still love the imagery. I still love the concept of the deck. But for some reason, I really struggled to connect to it, or to get the meanings that, you know, or to have that intuitive feel. And that really peed me off, to say the least, because obviously this was a deck that I'd been so keen to get, that I'd always been drawn to when I'd seen it online, and it just wasn't speaking to me. So that is the deck that I am angry at, because the first copy was misprinted, and now it just doesn't want to speak to me. But it's fine, it stays in my collection. I'm not going to get rid of it, because it still is a deck that I like the pictures of, and I think at a later stage I will come back to it and try again. Okay, so Envy, a deck you wanted because other people have it. Well, I have to admit that a large number of the decks that I've got because other people have had them and I've been drawn to them. I think the one that I got most obviously from that is my Light Seers. I'd seen this so often on people's channels and everyone had it, so I bought it. And to be honest, I have to admit that in this instance, the envy was justifiable, because this is now one of my top decks. It's in my list of 10 that I'd take with me if I could only have 10. It just totally, it works for me. I got it out for a reading the other day. I've got some cards on my desk from it because I wanted to do a spread, and I knew that I'd be able to do that, and I'd be able to bond with it. So my Light Seers is the Envy. I have to admit that another deck I've got in lately that came from hearing Deanne at Blue Crescent Tarot talk about it, and then having an offer, is my Antiquities of Magick Oracle. Now, I did film an opening kind of unboxing of my first impressions of this, but I haven't put it up yet. I might redo it. But this is another one that I've bought in. It's technically, obviously, it's not tarot, so I thought I'd just add it in there. Okay, so the next category on the list, so the Envy deck was Light Seers. So the next category is Lust, a deck you like for aesthetic reasons. So, as I said, this flipping this VR I found quite difficult. So I buy a lot of my decks because I'm drawn to the art, because for aesthetic reasons, not for other reasons, I tend to buy the decks when I'm really drawn to them. I don't tend to lust after the people in the decks, which I know some people kind of use that as a driving force. That's not me. And so it was quite hard because I felt like the lust wasn't there. But the one I pulled out, interestingly, was my Tarot of the Abyss. And the reason is because I think that this one, I'm so drawn to the characters. I get a lot of emotional feel from them. It's not, I suppose you could say it's a lust attraction as such, but I personally really love the expressions and the artwork in this deck. Even though it's black and white, I actually really like that, because I really like being able to look at the pictures in a more open manner without being distracted by the colours. So that one I put in aesthetics as a deck I'm drawn to in aesthetically, because, as I say, I don't think there are decks, I haven't really yet got to a point where I could go to a deck and go, you know, that card is my secret lover or something ridiculous like that. But then, you know, you see a card like that, well, you know, yeah. So I think that, you know, for aesthetic reasons, when you say lust, I think I'd go for this one. And I often pair it with, I will pair it usually, mostly with the Oracle of Echoes, because that's like the partner at the moment. And this is another one. Again, I really love the artwork from Antiquities, so, you know, this would come under that lust category as well in terms of the pairing. That this is one of my favorite Oracle cards. So yeah, so I think that for lust, I would go for that. It doesn't sort of match kind of what other people have done, but hey. So then Gluttony, well, again, made me laugh because, like Envy, several of my decks recently, I've purchased a lot in 2021 because I've really become engrossed in the community, and therefore I have to say that I probably have bought quite a few decks this year that I didn't need, but I purchased anyway. And what made me laugh about this category is reflects the fact these two decks will show you that I didn't need them at the time. This is the Sacred Creators Oracle. Now, having got the Light Seers, I then got the Muse and felt like I wanted to complete the set of 3. And I'd seen this on several people's channel. I then saw it on offer on a website when I was picking something else up. So I bought it, and you will see that I've not yet opened it. Now, bearing in mind that I probably bought this more than 6 months ago, it's in my pile to use, but I kind of feel like I will use it and I will get it out. It's just the time hasn't been right. But did I need to buy it at that moment in time? Probably not. I think it was a combination of Gluttony and Envy. I bought it because other people were talking about it and I felt like I ought to buy it, but I didn't really need it at the time. Another deck that sort of fits in this category, because I have to admit these are both Oracle, not Tarot. I apologise, but this is the Astrology Heavenly Bodies. I really want to tie astrology into some of my reading, but I think that's going to take a bit of study. Again, I saw this on offer when I was buying something else, so I picked it up, but decided that I wasn't going to open and work with it until I was ready to really focus. This is a beautiful, beautiful deck. I will look at it, but for now, this is I probably didn't need to buy it then, but I still bought it anyway. And I think with my tarot, there've been 2 or 3 like that. And one I picked up when I was away in London at half term was the Sun and Moon Tarot. I didn't need it. I had other decks that I still hadn't really worked with properly, but I was in Watkins books and felt like because I was there I ought to get something, and this was one I'd looked at. if I'm honest, it probably wasn't the one I should have bought at the time. I think I probably made a bad decision on that one. I do still like it as a deck. I'm not sure I like it as a small deck. I hate the size of the borders. And this was very much a spontaneous purchase. So I think that, you know, I didn't need it. I didn't need to buy it. But because I was there and because I wanted to buy something, this was the one I chose to buy of all the hundreds of decks that were sat there in the shop. I think it was partly because, having looked online at some of these tin decks, this one wasn't readily available. So when I saw it in the shop, it seemed like the right one to get. I'm not doing very well. I do apologise. I'm absolutely useless at doing the whole one deck thing. Maybe I need to review and come back. But I can do it for the Sloth. Everything's falling off. Apologies. So for the final category, which is Sloth, this is the deck that I come back to when I'm feeling lazy, and that is my Everyday Witch Tarot. This was the second Rider-Waite-Smith based deck I bought. Having bought the mini, guess what, on a whim, I realised I wanted the full size, so I have this in the mini and the full size version. The mini I can pull out because it sits on my desk beside me. This deck I pull out when I'm feeling lazy, and one of the main reasons for that actually is because the book works really well for me. I like the descriptions in the book because it has these little phrases and affirmations and things. It's a lot easier to kind of pick it up and go with it and not have to think too hard or remember meanings. And you know, I think that's a lot easier. I think the problem then is I'm less inclined to read this one intuitively. So if I'm then wanting to make it into a spread, sometimes it's harder to then associate. So I'd say that this is my lazy deck, and one of the main reasons is because the book is quite useful. Also, it's one that always speaks to me, and is just a comfortable deck for me. So there we go, my 7 decks for Deadly Sins. I apologise that it became more than 7, but I think if I were narrowing it down, I had the Pride was my Druid craft, because I'm proud of the job I did on modding it. My Greed, as I said, I don't yet read for anybody else, but I put my primary one for that was probably my Healing Waves, because this has such a personal connotation for me. Forest of Enchantment was my deck for Wrath, because my Envy, I would say the main one for that, as I said, was my Light Seers, but that is a good Envy. My Lust, I came down on the Anaturian decks because I really like the artwork, so Tower of the Abyss coupled with the Oracle of Echoes, so that's a slight cheat there. My Gluttony, I showed you how there are 2 or 3 decks that have come in that I've not opened, but when it came to tarot, it was probably my Sun and Moon deck. And finally, for Sloth, if I just move that out of the way, I brought out my Everyday Witch. My 7 decks for Deadly Sins. I'm really loving this tag. I think it's a great different way to look at decks, and I've really enjoyed actually giving it a go. Thank you to Sylvain and to everyone else that's taken part so far. Stay safe, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Bye.